A jury of your peers, after hearing all the evidence, has found you guilty of count 1 of the indictment 2024-666, aggravated murder of 2 people in the same act or transaction. They found you guilty of count 4 of 2024-666, aggravated murder of 2 people within a 3-year period, count 5 of 2024-666, use of a firearm in the commission of a felony, and count 1 of 2024-873, child endangerment. In accordance with Virginia law, although you have been found guilty of 2 counts of aggravated murder, the court can only sentence you on 1 count of aggravated murder, which will be count 1 of 2024-666. The statute requires a sentence of life imprisonment on this count, which is now the highest penalty one can receive in the Commonwealth of Virginia. This exact statute was our capital murder statute until Virginia abolished capital punishment in 2021. You should understand you were found guilty of crimes that 5 short years ago would have carried a sentence of death. That reflects the severity of your crimes and your actions. Life in prison is a punishment reserved for a very small number of individuals. Those whom the community has determined should never walk free again. It is a harsh sentence, but in this case, it is a justified one. In the 18 years I've been on the bench, I have seen hundreds of defendants appear before me, and I have had the arduous task of sentencing these individuals. In the vast majority of these cases, people made mistakes, were struggling with substance use disorders, or acting in anger, choosing violence in a moment that changed everything. They were not inherently bad people, but they made terrible decisions and suffered the consequences. Sentencing in those cases is difficult. It weighs on me, often long after the hearing is over. Only 2 times prior to today have I encountered something different in my courtroom. 2 individuals that carried no remorse, calculated, and planned their violent crimes and left many victims and devastation in their path. As I listen to the evidence in this case and listen to your testimony, it is apparent that I am once again looking at that same kind of evil. The disregard of the life of your wife, someone you supposedly loved, is almost unfathomable. Scheming for months a master plan involving so many moving parts, including deception and manipulation, luring a completely innocent man into your deadly trap, continuing on after the murders without a care, and not once thinking of the impact on Christine's daughter, the unspoken tragic victim of your behavior. You did not just take her mother from her, you placed her in the middle of the horror you created. She is young now, but one day she will understand your true self, and she will understand what you took from her, which is everything. The loss of her mother, who will never be a part of her life as she grows, the loss of her family and the security she lived under. All of this is lost based on your calculated and selfish behavior. It is impossible to comprehend what Joseph Ryan experienced, seeing you enter the room, being shot in the head, blinded, hearing you instruct the co-defendant to shoot him again. And Christine, to imagine her final thoughts as she initially thought you were there to save her from what she thought was a brutal attack, and then to see you over her stabbing her again and again with a knife in her neck, her final realization that this was all you're doing, and in her final moments thinking of her daughter. The sentence I impose today reflects not only the law, but the judgment of the community. The jury did not find you credible on the stand. To testify as you did shows the court that you still think that you are the smartest person in the room. One would hope that someday you will become tortured by what you have done to Christine, Joe, Christine's daughter, and their families, but nothing I have seen suggests that you will. The level of cruelty, calculation, and inhumanity in this case reflects something far deeper than anger or impulse. It reflects evil, which is why I carry no burden and find no hesitation in sentencing you to life.
I carry no burden and find no hesitation in sentencing you to life. 18 years on the bench, hundreds of defendants, and only 3 times in all of that, only 3, had she seen what she was looking at right now. She said it plainly, without drama, the way a doctor delivers a diagnosis they have been trained to give, but hoped they never would. She called it evil. Not anger, not impulse, not a man who made a terrible mistake under pressure. Evil. And then she sentenced him accordingly. But here is what makes this moment remarkable. Brendan Banfield had just spent the better part of 15 minutes standing at that podium, reading from a prepared statement, citing forensic reports, quoting expert findings, and telling a courtroom full of people including the families of the two people he murdered, that the system had failed him. He was the victim. The evidence had been misread. The detectives had been pressured. He was not responsible. He said all of this with what every observer described as complete and practiced composure. And then the judge dismantled every word of it in about 4 minutes.
Two individuals that carried no remorse, calculated, and planned their violent crimes and left many victims and devastation in their path. As I listened to the evidence in this case and listened to your testimony, it is apparent that I am once again looking at that same kind of evil. The disregard of the life of your wife, someone you supposedly loved, is almost unfathomable. Scheming for months a master plan involving so many moving parts, including deception and manipulation, luring a completely innocent man into your deadly trap, continuing on after the murders without a care, and not once thinking of the impact on Christine's daughter, the unspoken tragic victim of your behavior. You did not just take her mother from her, you placed her in the middle of the horror you created. She is young now, but one day she will understand your true self, and she will understand what you took from her, which is everything.
To understand why that moment hit the way it did, you need to know everything that came before it. You need to know who Brendan Banfield is, what he did, what he claimed, and why a courtroom full of grieving people sat in absolute silence while an 18-year veteran of the bench used the word evil to describe a man standing 6 feet away from her. Let's go back to the beginning. The case is Commonwealth versus Brendan Banfield, heard in Fairfax County, Virginia. The charges are aggravated murder of 2 people in the same act or transaction, aggravated murder of 2 people within a 3-year period, use of a firearm in the commission of a felony, and child endangerment. Those are not separate events. They are the same event, charged 4 different ways, because of what happened on February 24th, 2023. On that morning, Brendan Banfield's wife Christine was killed in their home, stabbed in the neck, repeatedly, by a knife. A man named Joseph Ryan was also killed that morning, shot in the head, then shot again after he had already fallen, because Banfield instructed his co-defendant, a woman named Juliana Perez Magahis, to fire a second time. Joseph Ryan had not come to that house looking for trouble. He had been lured there, deliberately, by Brendan Banfield, who had spent months posing as Christine online, creating a fake persona on a fetish website, selecting Joseph Ryan as a man who could be framed for his wife's murder, and engineering an encounter that would make it look like a violent intruder had broken in and killed Christine, only to be shot in self-defense. That is the prosecution's theory of the case. And a jury of 12 people, after hearing all the evidence, found it entirely credible. But Brendan Banfield never accepted that verdict. Not publicly, not privately, and certainly not in that courtroom on the day of his sentencing. Which brings us to the room itself. A sentencing hearing in Virginia is a structured proceeding. The judge has already received what is called a pre-sentence investigation report, a detailed document prepared by probation officers that covers the defendant's background, criminal history, mental health, education, and family situation. Both sides can submit corrections, and on this day, the defense attorney, referred to in the transcript as Mr. Carroll, had several minor factual amendments on the record: a year that needed updating, a county name that was wrong, Banfield's age listed incorrectly as 42 when he is 41. Small things, procedural things, the kind of corrections that happen in every sentencing and mean nothing beyond accuracy. What was not small and what was not procedural was what came next. The Commonwealth called 3 witnesses, victim impact witnesses, people allowed by law to address the court directly before sentencing, to describe the effect of the crime on their lives. This is a right established in Virginia law and mirrored in most states. The Sixth Amendment protects defendants. The Crime Victims' Rights Act protects the people left behind. And on this morning, 3 of those people spoke. The first was Danielle Hawker, Christine's older sister. She has brown curly hair, just like Christine did. She told the court that when she looks in the mirror sometimes, she sees Christine's face first, and then in a flash it's gone, and she is left confused by her own reflection. She told the court that she had not spoken publicly since the murder, not because she had nothing to say, but because she was protecting Christine's memory from being distorted.
Please, thank you. Again, my name is Danielle Hawker, and Christine Banfield is my younger sister. My family has publicly stayed silent since my sister's murder, except for a brief statement after the trial concluded. We chose to protect Christine and Valerie to prevent the media from contorting our words or create fodder for keyboard warriors. We were, however, not spared the media's attention. In the hours following Christine's murder, I received a call from a reporter masked in sympathy, asking for a statement and pictures of Christine. Since then, my husband and I have received countless calls and emails, but they pale in comparison to the overwhelming volume my parents have endured. Christine does, however, deserve to be talked about by those that loved her. Grief is not something that is done on display or shared, except those closest to you, and even then, it is more often hides behind closed doors in quiet moments. Internally, I feel like a different person, like my identity has shifted in an unimaginable way. Part of who I was, who I still am, is a big sister, and in what seemed like seconds, it was taken from me, taken from us. While justice was served, it does not lift the grief or make more space for it. It will never bring Joseph Ryan back to his loved ones or Christine back to our family. In the 3 years since Christine's death, some days I feel like I'm living with a ticking time bomb waiting for it to explode. Fear and anxiety taking over, my mind telling my body that something else terrible is going to happen. I waited for answers, for more information. I was in a perpetual state of limbo. The daily messages I would receive with pictures of Valerie stopped and were replaced with calls from reporters wanting the next headline. The text Christine and I exchanged stopped. The evening call I would randomly get while she was driving home from work would never happen again. The trip I had booked to celebrate Valerie's 5th birthday the following month would not happen. Life as I knew it ended, yet I remained guilty for living and left without the one person who should have known me the longest, gone. When we were little, Christine and I would often get mistaken for twins. We were nearly 4 years apart, my baby sister, or my sissy, as I like to call her. We both had curly hair, but otherwise, I didn't understand what other people saw. When I look into a mirror, I sometimes see her first, my face replaced by hers, and in a flash, she's gone, and I'm left confused by my own reflection. She was her own person, never trying to be me, but always wanted to be by my side, and I hers. I don't remember much of my life before she was born. I have only a handful of memories that are more like looking at a picture. I do have a vivid memory of going to the baby doctor with my mom and Grammy, our maternal grandmother, who we also called Grammy Bird. Grammy would keep me entertained by walking around outside and picking flowers. During one appointment, I was stung by a bee and became upset, wanting my mom. Grammy brought me inside, where a baby monitor showed a dark, blurry image I couldn't understand. As she held me, my mom pointed to it and said it was the baby. At just about 4 years old, the same age as Valerie was when Christine was killed, I was excited to be a big sister. Once she was born, I became we. I haven't stopped saying we when I speak about my childhood.
By a media cycle that had already tried to reduce her sister to a headline. She described learning, during the trial, that on October 29th, 2022, the same day she and her mother and aunt had spent the afternoon at Halloween events with Christine and 4-year-old Valerie, Brendan and Juliana had been at a gun range, practicing. She said when she learned that, she went numb.
During the course of the trial, I learned that on October 29th, 2022, Brendan and Juliana went to a gun range. That same day, I, along with our mom and aunt, visited for Halloween. We spent the day at various Halloween events in the area with Christine and Valerie, while Brendan and Juliana perfected this part of their plan. When I learned this, I went numb. I felt as though I had in some way been used to facilitate what happened simply because I didn't recognize the signs. Since then, I have replayed countless moments, fixating on small details and convincing myself that I should have noticed something, that there must have been a clue that I missed. But looking back with information I did not have at the time distorts what I actually experienced, yet the emotional weight of the guilt still feels real. The shame runs deep, and it has caused me to question my own judgment and perception, even though I understand that I was evaluating incomplete and concealed information. Guilt is meant to be tied to a choice, and I did not choose harm. Despite this understanding, I continue to struggle with the feeling of being drawn into something I never knowingly participated in. I know rationally that these feelings are misplaced, but I do not yet know how long.
She described Banfield's trial testimony, the testimony he gave in his own defense, as the most self-serving display of narcissism she had ever witnessed.
I didn't truly know Brendan at all. I don't believe anyone did. Not family, not friends, and certainly not Christine. His testimony was the most self-serving display of narcissism I have ever witnessed. He attempted to smear her through outright lies and victim blaming, accusing her of betraying the oath she took as a nurse, an accusation that not only attacked her integrity, but further wronged the vulnerable patients in her care. As Christine's sister, I didn't just lose her. I had to sit and listen to a version of her that did not exist. I knew her in a way that he never could. I knew her honesty, her compassion, her refusal to live with secrets. Hearing him attempt to rewrite her life and her character felt like losing her all over again, piece by piece, in a room where she could not defend herself. His lies did not just attempt to destroy her reputation, they forced me to relive my grief with anger and helplessness I cannot fully describe. He was the one that had countless affairs, several attempts at finding the right mistress that would eventually help carry out the plan with him, because the absurd line of questioning about a plan didn't just develop when he started his affair with Juliana. I believe she meant no more to him than anyone else in his life. She was just another person to control and exploit. What he presented as affection was manipulation. What may have appeared as love was nothing more than strategy. If there had been any genuine intent to build a life with Juliana, he could have chosen a lawful and honest path. He could have divorced and moved on. But divorce would have required relinquishing control, and control was always the priority. His actions were not driven by love, but a desire for power.
She said he tried to rewrite Christine's character with lies. She said listening to it felt like losing her sister all over again, piece by piece, in a room where Christine could not defend herself. Then Deirdre Fisher appeared on a screen. She could not be in the courtroom in person for medical reasons. She was Joseph Ryan's mother. She had him when she was 16 years old, and circumstances had made their early relationship difficult. She was unable to raise him. She fought legally for the right to simply be in his life. And Joe, by the time he was 14, had sought her out and built a relationship with her on his own terms. He told her once that she was the reason he learned to love unconditionally. She was the last person he called the night before he was murdered. He sent her a picture of himself that night. It was the last time she heard the word mom.
And your relationship to Joseph Ryan?
I was Joseph Ryan's mother.
And do you have a statement that you would like to read describing the impact of Joe's loss in your life?
I would, yes, thank you.
Please go ahead.
First, I'd like to say, I wish I could be present in court today, but for medical reasons, I have been unable to attend the trial. But in my stead, my sister Grace Fisher-Littner is here and has been for the whole trial. And my cousin, Jan Gillis. So I thank them both for being here, for Joe and for myself. And I'd like to thank the Honorable Judge Penny S. Ascaritis and this courtroom for allowing me to give a victim statement today for my beloved son, Joseph Nathan Ryan. I would like to speak about the impact of losing Joe. His brutal murder the trial that the murder and cruel, false claim that Joe himself was a murderer. Most importantly, I want to speak about the type of man Joe was. When I had Joe, I was just 16. I did not have financial, legal, or physical ability to raise my son. Despite being discounted as his mother, I fought for the right to see him and prevailed as a loving part of his life. Joe became old enough by the age of 14 to pursue a closer relationship with me. He told me at one point I was the reason he learned how to love unconditionally. I spent holidays and vacations with Joe. He called me often. Our closeness spanned the rest of his lifetime. I was the last person he called the night before he was brutally murdered. He sent me a photo of himself that night. It was the last time I got to hear the word mom. I got a call about his murder 2 days after it occurred. As in life, in death, Joe was taken from me over and over again. The lead detective explained he had not been told I was Joe's mother. He was compassionate, and I would go on to include me, as he did, and the defense team in updates about the murder investigation and legal process.
She was not notified of his death for 2 days. When the lead detective finally called her, he explained that he had not been told she was Joe's mother. She described what Banfield's defense team had tried to make of her son at trial: the intruder, the fetish guy, the rapist, the murderer, or simply, as she put it, the other forgettable guy. She said his face was not even shown during the murder trial.
Brandon Banfield, his defense team, even some of the press carelessly characterized Joe as the intruder. The fetish guy into rough sex. The rapist and the murderer. Or simply the other forgettable guy. Not even showing Joe's face during the murder trial. Joe was chosen because Brendan Banfield thought he would make a good dupe to be framed for the planned murder of his wife. As with so many other things, Brendan was wrong. In some ways, my son was flawed, regular Joe. But he also had some amazing qualities. Joe was extremely caring. He lived with his grandmother and was dedicated to her health and her well-being. He moved to Florida to care for his parental grandfather, Pap, before he died from advanced dementia. He went for 2 months to care for a woman he loved, who had radical hysterectomy, also taking care of her young daughter. That's part of who Joe was. Joe was a guy who believed in fighting for the underdog and even actual neglected dogs. He would walk into an animal shelter and ask for the oldest, ugliest dogs. bring them home, and love them for years. When Joe was murdered, he left behind a dog named Kitty, who waited for him at the top of the stairs. Joe also did things like gardening, feeding stray cats, teaching autistic kids to do judicial, and working at a homeless shelter. He believed that those with less should be fairly treated and supported, that Black and brown people should not be marginalized. Joe also was a feminist. He spoke out about the mistreatment of women during the start of the Me Too movement. Although he was chosen as a scapegoat from a website that is considered fetish, he was on that site to find a consenting partner because he believed in a woman's right to bodily autonomy and in her control over her romantic and sexual life. Joe wasn't just the disposable caricature he was made out to be. He had a face, he had a name, he had a life. But Brendan Banfield shot his face, soiled his name, and treated his life as disposable.
She recounted who Joseph Ryan actually was. A man who moved to Florida to care for a grandfather with advanced dementia. A man who taught autistic children jujitsu. A man who walked into animal shelters and asked for the oldest, ugliest dogs, brought them home and loved them for years. When he was killed, he left behind a dog named Kitty, who waited for him at the top of the stairs. She ended by speaking to him directly. Be kind to yourself, Mom. Take better care of yourself, Mom. Love you, Mom. I won't forget you, Joe. I hear you now. If you have been watching this and feeling like justice is something that happens to other people, in other courtrooms, in other cases, I need you to stay with me. Because what happened next in this courtroom is exactly the kind of moment that most trials never produce. And it starts with a decision Brendan Banfield made that a man with any genuine self-awareness would never have made. Sangeeta Ryan, Joseph's aunt, spoke last for the families. She described meeting Joe as a preschooler with a giant backpack and a tiny pink purse. She spoke of Joe's grandmother, Connie, who raised him from birth and whose health had declined so severely since his murder that she could not be in the courtroom that day. She said the Ryan family had remained silent for 3 years out of respect for law enforcement and for Christine's family. And then she said something that landed in that room like a verdict. What they witnessed from Banfield throughout the trial was not remorse. It was arrogance, a sustained effort to rewrite reality in order to protect himself.
Hello, Honorable Judge Ascarati, members of the Fairfax County team, members of the gallery, our family, Christine's family, friends, and members of the press. We are Joe's family. We're the people he loved, and we loved him. With the exception of speaking once at Ms. Perez Magalier's sentencing, we have remained silent since this tragedy devastated our family 3 years ago. Judge, we thank you for listening to our words back in February. We chose silence out of respect for law enforcement, for the Commonwealth, and for Christine's family, whose loss is beyond imagination. Christine was taken by the very person she trusted to build a life with and raise a child with. We also remained silent because Joe and Christine were not only taken from us on February 24th, 2023, but were repeatedly disrespected by the defendant's calculated lies. Let me be absolutely clear. This was not a moment of weakness, confusion, or loss of control. This was a deliberate, planned act carried out by someone who believed he could outsmart the system and escape accountability. And even after taking 2 lives, the defendant continued lying to investigators, lying to the court here, lying to his child and her family, and attempting to manipulate anyone who would listen. What we witnessed was not remorse. It was arrogance. It was a sustained effort to rewrite reality in order to protect himself. That matters because it shows exactly who he is. He didn't just take Joe and Christine from us. He tried to erase the truth of who they were, and in doing so, inflicted further harm on the people who loved them. This crime did not just take Joe's life. It took his place in the world. It took a son, a grandson, a brother, a cousin, a friend, a caregiver.
After the family testimony concluded, the prosecution made its sentencing argument. Short, precise. The prosecutor asked the court to impose every minute.
Judge, I want to be clear what we're asking for today before I begin the meat of my argument. We're asking for a life sentence to serve in FE 2024-666 count 1. As we know, the imposition of 2 life sentences is not available given the 2 parts of the statute that we are working with. So I want to be clear that that is what we're asking the court to go forward on and why. And I'm also asking the court to obviously impose the 3 years that is required by count 5 in that same case number. And in FE 2024-873 count 1, I'm asking you to sentence him to 5 years and not suspend any of that. Judge, Brendan Banfield planned and carried out the executions of 2 innocent victims, his wife Christine and Joe Ryan, a stranger to him. He planned their murders over several months, enlisting the help of his co-defendant and affair partner, Juliana Perez Magalhães. He planned ruthless and brutal killings, shooting Joe in the head, stabbing Christine in the neck over and over again, and instructing Juliana to shoot Joe a second time. He manipulated the crime scene and lied about the circumstances of their deaths, painting Joe as a violent intruder when he had hand-selected Joe as his second victim, posing as Christine online looking for someone with whom to act out a rape fantasy outside of her marriage. And neither version is at all close to the truth. They are lies. Christine was a daughter, a sister, a mother, a nurse, and a friend. Her parents, her sister, her coworkers and friends told you about Christine and how much she matters to them in their lives. Joe was a son, a brother, a grandson, an uncle, a cousin, and a devoted animal lover. His mom, Deirdre, and his Ryan family members told you how much he matters to them in their lives. These families won't be able to celebrate obvious, joyous milestones like graduations, weddings, holiday celebrations with Christine and Joe. It's important for us to remember the intangible moments that these families have lost as well. Christine was murdered before her daughter started kindergarten. Christine is never going to take a first day of school picture with her daughter. She's never going to attend field day or chaperone a field trip. Christine will never know what activities her daughter loves. Will she play soccer? Be on a summer swim team? Will she play an instrument? Be a theater kid? Will she be an artist? Christine won't be here to know any of that. Christine won't be here to offer her daughter opportunities to help her find what she loves. And Valerie won't have her mother's guidance and love as she navigates the question of who she is. Joe is loved and cherished by his family, and they endured a false narrative portraying Joe to be a violent criminal. He was a loving caretaker in his family. He cared for his grandpa, his grandma, and his mom, uprooting himself selflessly to be closer to them as they needed him. He loved and cared for neglected and abused animals. He was single when he was murdered. He won't get married. He won't become a father. He won't create his own family, and he won't create any new memories with the family he has here today. Banfield and his co-defendant are the causes of the immeasurable loss suffered by Christine and Joe's families. There is nothing that can lessen their devastation. Nothing we can do or say will bring Joe and Christine back to their families. This sentencing ends the in-court process, but it is not an end to anyone's grief. For all of these reasons, I am asking you to impose every minute of active incarceration that the law requires and that the law allows. The sun should never shine on Mr. Banfield's skin as a free man again.
Of active incarceration that the law requires and that the law allows. She said, and I want you to hear this line clearly, The sun should never shine on Mr. Banfield's skin as a free man again. The defense attorney then made his argument. He raised several forensic questions he said the jury had not been required to resolve. Questions about digital forensics, about who had accessed Christine's laptop on 10 separate occasions when Banfield was provably away from the home, about bloodstain pattern analysis, about the absence of Banfield's DNA and fingerprints on the knife. These are legitimate legal arguments. A defense attorney's job at sentencing, even after a conviction, is to preserve the record, to raise every argument that might form the basis of an appeal.
There's recognition on the part of the defense that the jury verdict leaves very little room for discretion, but there are some areas that I would like to argue with relating to the Commonwealth's argument as well as the narrative that's been presented. The Commonwealth pursued a theory of catfishing for years, Judge, while having the answers within their grasp with the digital forensics examiner. Behind the scenes, police officers were trying to change the expert opinion, and Detective Miller, to his credit, resisted. In fact, this executive summary that he testified to remained the same except for one new fact, the changed testimony of the co-defendant. Commonwealth made a significant effort to diminish the role that digital forensics plays in these and the other investigations. They never called their witness for the Commonwealth's case, and the strategy paid off because the jury saw this as credibility determination between the co-defendant and my client. That was a much easier question for them to answer instead of the difficulties of parsing through the digital evidence and other scientific evidence. By making it about credibility, there was no need to resolve such questions such as, if the co-defendant did not know how to log into the suspect accounts, who accessed Christine Banfield's laptop on at least 10 occasions when Brenda Banfield was nowhere near the home or the device in question? Second question, how did Christine Banfield not discover the two-factor authentication on her personal cell phone that the co-defendant testified that she secured surreptitiously from Christine Banfield and then put it back? And finally, with regard to digital forensics, how was this plan, according to the co-defendant, executed on February 23rd, the night before the murder, with Christine's laptop, while within minutes Christine was accessing her work and also shopping? Those questions remain, Judge, and those were incumbent upon the jury.
That is not improper. That is the system working as designed. And then Brendan Banfield stood up. He was given the opportunity to speak. This is called an allocution, the defendant's right to address the court directly before sentence is imposed. It is not testimony. It cannot be cross-examined. It is simply the defendant's final words before the judge rules. Most defendants in this position offer something in the direction of acknowledgement. Many express remorse. Some simply ask for mercy. What Brendan Banfield did was something different. He read a prepared statement.
Sir, is there anything you wish to say at this time before sentence is imposed?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm greatly disappointed in the legal system. The system has failed not only me, but also Christine, my daughter Valerie, the Bensons, and the rest of my family. I was found guilty of a crime that I did not commit, but it's actually impossible to have committed the crime, as the prosecution, their experts, and their witnesses have presented. The prosecution and their witnesses' statements do not match the evidence. My rights to defend my family has been taken away, to defend my home and myself. This is a protected right that I'm sure everyone listening here knows they have. My right has been discarded. I'm being sentenced on an impossible set of circumstances. The prosecution's catfish theory was forced on detectives. Detectives did not agree with the catfish theory and were harassed, belittled, and then transferred out of their department unwillingly. 3 different digital forensic experts agreed there was no catfish. This includes Fairfax Detective Miller, their expert. This is a quote from his report. The event spanned over a 46-day period from 1/9/23 to 2/24/23. There's no indication that Christine lost control of her devices during that time. Christine is also active with these related specificialities to her during and around the relevant times. Christine also has a pattern of being active on her devices during the relevant times over the year leading up to the period. This will include consistent email and browser activity between the hours of 2300 and 100 hours. Although the not detailed, sorry. Detective Miller's report was sent for independent review to the University of Alabama for peer review. This is a best practice declared for digital forensics. Holly Kennedy of the University of Alabama agreed with Detective Miller's process and finding that there was no loss of device, no loss of dominion and control during this time. When Juliana was questioned about the details of the case, she was unable to verify or remember the information. Juliana did not know the password to Christine's phone, the laptop, the email account, the Telegram, or the FetLife accounts. She did not even know the name of the email account. How could she have accessed it without any of that information? Juliana claimed that she wrote messages but could not identify a single message that she wrote. Juliana said that the Gmail was created on the laptop when it was created on the phone, then said that I deleted the two-factor authentication, which was never deleted, never hidden, and was still there. The Telegram application was also not hidden, always available on Christine's laptop. It was never uninstalled and reinstalled and was always available. When Juliana was questioned about the email account, this is her quote: "I was not the one logging in. It was Brendan who accessed the email. The question was then restated and resent and said again, and this is her second quote: I was not the one logging in. The email account was accessed approximately 10 times while I was not home. This includes when I was in Maryland at FLETC, a secure government facility that required an appointment and ID verification to enter. If Juliana did not enter these email accounts, but they were still logged in, there's only one other person that could access these accounts, and that is Christine. There are also 2 instances where neither Juliana or I were home with the logins. This includes the morning of 2/24, when I had left for work and was seen on video at McDonald's, and Juliana had left the house. Her movements were tracked and verified by GPS. Her phone logged that she was parked in the cul-de-sac, and her Apple Watch had logged her steps leaving the home. And by her own testimony, she also stated that she had left the home. Yet after that, the laptop was then logged in and accessed again. There is no dispute that Joe Ryan brought the knife to my home. My DNA and fingerprints are not on the knife. Joe Ryan's DNA is on the knife, right at the junction of the handle and the blade. The DNA is right where you would expect it to be for someone who is forcefully using the knife. This is further verified by the injury that is on Joe's thumb in his hand. The medical examiner verified the injury on Joe's thumb could be caused by the knife. There are no injuries to my hands, nothing to indicate I ever held the knife. Joe's DNA is also under Joe Ryan's fingernails. Joe's DNA is also under Christine's fingernails, indicating that she tried to fight him off. Joe Ryan's hands have a mixture of Joe's and Christine's DNA. When he got back up and struck me in the back, it was transferred to the back of my jacket. Juliana's original statement on 2/24 stated that I never touched Joe. She repeated this in both of her proffers and at trial. The prosecution has repeatedly said that I manipulated the scene and moved Joe Ryan. I never left Christine's side. I only tried to render aid to her.
For nearly 12 minutes, he cited the forensic report of Detective Miller by specific language. He quoted Juliana's testimony back to the court verbatim, twice, to argue she had contradicted herself. He raised the University of Alabama peer review of the digital forensics. He discussed GPS data. He mentioned a government facility in Maryland that required appointment and ID verification to enter. He argued that the only logical explanation for certain account logins was that Christine herself had made them. He argued that Joe Ryan had brought the knife, that the DNA proved it, that the injury to Ryan's thumb corroborated it, that his own hands showed no corresponding injuries. He said 3 digital forensic experts, including the prosecution's own Detective Miller, had found no evidence of catfishing. He said detectives who disagreed with the prosecution's theory had been harassed and transferred out of their departments. He said, "I was found guilty of a crime that I did not commit." He said, "I am greatly disappointed in the legal system." And then he sat down. The judge waited. And then she spoke. 18 years on the bench, hundreds of defendants. Only 3 times had she seen this. She described the vast majority of people who had stood before her, people who made mistakes, who were struggling, who acted in a moment and suffered the consequences. She said those cases weigh on her. She said sentencing in those cases is difficult and stays with her long after the hearing ends. Then she turned to Banfield directly. She said, "As I listen to the evidence in this case and listen to your testimony, it is apparent that I am once again looking at that same kind of evil." She described the plan in terms so specific, they felt like a recitation of a crime scene rather than a judicial observation. Scheming for months, manipulating moving parts, luring a completely innocent man into a deadly trap, continuing afterward without a care. She spoke of Christine's final moments. She said Christine had initially believed Banfield was there to save her. Then she saw what was actually happening. Her final realization. Her final thoughts about her daughter. Then, the judge said the line that defines this entire case. "To testify as you did shows the court that you still think that you are the smartest person in the room." Let that sit for a moment. This man had just spent 12 minutes citing forensic reports, GPS records, peer-reviewed digital analysis, and courtroom testimony in front of a judge who had presided over his entire trial, who had heard every expert, reviewed every exhibit, and watched every witness take the stand. He presented it all as though she simply had not understood the evidence the first time, as though she needed him to walk her through it. She saw exactly what he was doing, and she named it.
The statute requires a sentence of life imprisonment on this count, which is now the highest penalty one can receive in the Commonwealth of Virginia. This exact statute was our capital murder statute until Virginia abolished capital punishment in 2021. You should understand you were found guilty of crimes that 5 short years ago would have carried a sentence of death. That reflects the severity of your crimes and your actions. Life in prison is a punishment reserved for a very small number of individuals. Those whom the community has determined should never walk free again. It is a harsh sentence, but in this case, it is a justified one. In the 18 years I've been on the bench, I have seen hundreds of defendants appear before me, and I have had the arduous task of sentencing these individuals. In the vast majority of these cases, people made mistakes, were struggling with substance use disorders, or acting in anger, choosing violence in a moment that changed everything. They were not inherently bad people, but they made terrible decisions and suffered the consequences. Sentencing in those cases is difficult. It weighs on me, often long after the hearing is over. Only 2 times prior to today have I encountered something different in my courtroom. 2 individuals that carried no remorse, calculated, and planned their violent crimes and left many victims and devastation in their path. As I listen to the evidence in this case and listen to your testimony, it is apparent that I am once again looking at that same kind of evil. The disregard of the life of your wife, someone you supposedly loved, is almost unfathomable. Scheming for months a master plan involving so many moving parts, including deception and manipulation, luring a completely innocent man into your deadly trap, continuing on after the murders without a care, and not once thinking of the impact on Christine's daughter, the unspoken tragic victim of your behavior. You did not just take her mother from her, you placed her in the middle of the horror you created. She is young now, but one day she will understand your true self, and she will understand what you took from her, which is everything. The loss of her mother, who will never be a part of her life as she grows, the loss of her family and the security she lived under. All of this is lost based on your calculated and selfish behavior. It is impossible to comprehend what Joseph Ryan experienced, seeing you enter the room, being shot in the head, blinded, hearing you instruct the co-defendant to shoot him again. And Christine, to imagine her final thoughts as she initially thought you were there to save her from what she thought was a brutal attack, and then to see you over her stabbing her again and again with a knife in her neck, her final realization that this was all you're doing, and in her final moments thinking of her daughter. The sentence I impose today reflects not only the law, but the judgment of the community. The jury did not find you credible on the stand. To testify as you did shows the court that you still think that you are the smartest person in the room. One would hope that someday you will become tortured by what you have done to Christine, Joe, Christine's daughter, and their families, but nothing I have seen suggests that you will. The level of cruelty, calculation, and inhumanity in this case reflects something far deeper than anger or impulse. It reflects evil, which is why I carry no burden and find no hesitation in sentencing you to life.
She said she hoped he would one day be tortured by what he had done, but nothing she had seen suggested he would be. The level of cruelty, calculation, and inhumanity in this case, she said, reflects something far deeper than anger or impulse. It reflects evil, which is why I carry no burden and find no hesitation in sentencing you to life. Life in the Virginia State Penitentiary. No possibility of parole, no good conduct allowances, no earned sentence credits, no conditional release. Additionally, 3 years consecutive for the firearm charge, a mandatory term that cannot be suspended. 5 years consecutive for child endangerment. Every sentence running one after the other. Before the hearing closed, the prosecution raised one more request, asking the court to order that Banfield have no contact with his daughter Valerie. The request came from Valerie's guardian, her therapist, and her counselor. The judge listened, considered it carefully, and then explained a procedural reality. A no-contact order requires probation as its legal mechanism, and a life sentence without parole leaves no probationary period to attach the condition to. The judge denied the request, not because she disagreed with its spirit, but because the law did not give her the tool to implement it. Banfield goes to prison for life. Valerie's protection will have to be managed through other legal channels.
The Commonwealth is asking that a condition of the sentence be that the defendant have no contact with his daughter, Valerie. This is at the request of her guardian ad litem, her therapist, and her counsel.
I understand, but I'm not doing any probation, so how can I do a no-contact order?
Judge, I think with the 6 months of post-release, same action, even though there is no likelihood of those 6 months ever being imposed, they are suspended on the condition as required by statute. This condition would operate similarly.
But that would only work for those sentences, correct?
That is correct.
I mean, I can't order him no contact if I'm giving him life in prison.
Understood, Judge. I'm making the request.
All right, I just
Thank you.
There is a legal lesson buried in every moment of what you just watched, and it is one that is worth carrying with you. Here it is. In a criminal proceeding, the allocution, the defendant's right to speak before sentencing, is one of the most consequential moments in the entire process. It is the last impression a judge carries into the sentencing decision. And here is what Brendan Banfield's allocution demonstrated with remarkable clarity. A judge who has sat through your entire trial knows the evidence better than you think she does. She has read the expert reports. She has heard the witnesses. She has evaluated the credibility of every person who took the stand. Using your allocution to relitigate the trial, to imply, even implicitly, that the court simply got it wrong, does not create reasonable doubt. The verdict is already in. What it does is tell the sentencing judge exactly what you think of her judgment, and exactly what you think of yourself. The judge said it herself. The jury did not find him credible on the stand. His allocution did not change that assessment. It confirmed it. The smartest person in the room almost never is. And in a courtroom with an 18-year veteran on the bench, Acting like you are is not a strategy. It is a confession.